The moment he walked through those doors, 4 balloons popped at the same time. 4. The sound cracked through the studio like a sentence being handed down. With no trial, no evidence, just a verdict, delivered in less than 3 seconds. The audience went wild. The host could barely keep a straight face. And the man standing in the middle of it all? He just smiled, slow, easy, unbothered, like he'd walked into worse rooms than this and come out just fine. His name was Ezekiel Cardenas, 34 years old, 6'2" of lean, caramel-skinned composure. Fresh fade so clean it had no business being in a plumber's story, low waves sitting perfectly on top, a 5 o'clock shadow framing a jaw that could have been chiseled out of dark marble, quiet, deep-set eyes that didn't beg for your attention, broad shoulders filling out a worn gray work shirt like it was tailored. Steel-toed boots, calm hands. He looked like a man who had seen a lot and decided a long time ago that none of it was worth panicking over. The show was called Love Hunt, one of those flashy, fast-paced dating shows that filmed out of Los Angeles, California. The kind of show where 5 women stood behind 5 oversized balloons and popped them the second they lost interest in the man walking through the door. Simple concept, brutal execution. And the producers loved it because people were messy, and messy made for great television. The studio was dressed up like something between a Vegas lounge and a Valentine's Day fever dream. Red and gold lighting, roses everywhere, a crowd that had already had one too many complimentary drinks. The energy was loud and competitive, and just a little bit cruel. And into that room walked Ezekiel Cardenas, the host, a sharp, high-energy woman named Delilah Osei, 31 years old, with a wild natural afro and a mouth that moved faster than most people's thoughts. Nearly choked on her own intro when those 4 balloons went down simultaneously. "I think that might be a new record," Delilah said, pressing her hand to her chest in mock horror. She looked at the 4 deflated balloons swinging sadly from their strings and then back at Ezekiel. Then she looked at his work shirt, then his boots, then back at his face, which, she had to admit, was doing a lot of heavy lifting in his favor. "I'm shocked the rest of them didn't pop theirs too," she added with a grin. "So, what's your name, handsome, and how old are you?" "Ezekiel Cardenas," he said. Voice low, steady, the kind of voice that didn't need a microphone. 34. "And what do you do for a living, Ezekiel?" Not a flicker of hesitation, not a single drop of shame. "I'm a plumber," he said, looking straight at the camera like he was daring it to flinch. "Been plumbing for 16 years. The 5th balloon exploded before he even finished the word plumber. And then the woman behind it. Brianna Solis, 26 years old, long, bone-straight hair, a dress that cost more than some people's rent, and the kind of confidence that only comes from never being told no, leaned into her microphone and delivered the line that would break the internet by morning. "I would literally rather let cats eat my face than date a plumber." The studio lost its mind. Half the audience was howling with laughter. The other half was groaning. Delilah covered her mouth with her clipboard, and Ezekiel, God bless him, just stood there with that same quiet smile. Like he'd heard worse. Like this was Tuesday. But here's the thing. Nobody in that room knew yet. That comment? Those 5 popped balloons? That entire moment of public humiliation? Was all part of the plan. Now there was still 1 balloon standing. 1. And behind it stood a woman who had watched the whole circus unfold, with her arms crossed and one perfectly arched eyebrow raised so high it was practically speaking its own language. Her name was Celine Beaumont, 29 years old, originally from New Orleans but living in Los Angeles for the past 4 years. She was the kind of woman who walked into rooms quietly and left them unforgettable. Dark skin, smooth as polished wood, natural hair pinned up in a loose twist with a few curls escaping around her face like they had somewhere better to be. She had wide, warm, brown eyes that missed absolutely nothing, and a mouth that curved into a half-smile that somehow made you feel like you were in on a joke nobody else understood. She was a middle school art teacher by day, patient, thoughtful, the kind of person who saw the whole picture when everyone else was staring at one corner of it. And right now she was staring at Ezekiel Cardenas, a man the entire room had just dismissed, and seeing something completely different from what everyone else saw. Delilah turned to her with barely concealed excitement. "Soline, you are the last balloon standing, girl. Are you not bothered by any of this?" Soline shrugged one shoulder. "Not particularly." The audience murmured. Brianna, the cat-face woman, let out an actual laugh. "Not particularly? Sis, he's a plumber." "I heard him," Soline said simply. "And the work shirt?" Brianna pressed. "I see it." "And you still—" "Brianna," Soline said, turning to look at her with that same calm half-smile. "A job is a job. Plumbers are essential. And last time I checked, the man can fix a leaky pipe, which is more than I can say for most of the men I've dated. The audience erupted. Delilah cackled so hard she had to grab the set for support. And Ezekiel, for the first time since he'd walked into that studio, let out a real laugh. Not the polite, careful smile he'd been wearing like armor. A real one, warm and surprised, crinkling the corners of those deep-set eyes. Like he hadn't expected that. Like it caught him completely off guard. And something shifted in that studio. Something small but significant. The way things shift when two people accidentally show each other something real in a room full of performance. But Delilah wasn't done. She never was. Okay. Ezekiel, I've got to ask, Delilah said, turning back to him with her clipboard clutched to her chest. What is the most important thing in your life right now? Ezekiel didn't even blink. Being a good father to my daughter. The studio went from loud to complicated in about half a second. One of the already popped balloon women, Amber Reyes, 27, sharp nails, sharper opinions, let out a groan from the sideline. He has a kid, she announced to no one in particular, like she was reading a breaking news alert. She's 9, Ezekiel continued, unbothered, and she is the center of my world. I would do anything for her. Delilah turned to the sideline women. Thoughts? Amber didn't hesitate. I mean, it's sweet, I guess. Kind of. But let's be real. He works a minimum wage job and he's already got a whole child. That means no money, possible baby mama drama, and you will absolutely always come second. That's not sweet. That's a full-time warning label. Exactly, said another woman from the sideline. Claudette Morrow, 30, wearing an expression like she'd already written Ezekiel's eulogy. I didn't come on this show to be a stepmom to some stranger's kid. I'm here to level up, not sign up for somebody else's problems. Delilah turned to Celine. Celine, you heard all of that. The daughter, the job, the whole package. Still standing. Celine looked at Ezekiel, then at the women on the sideline. Then back at Delilah. Still standing, she said. The audience went crazy again. And Brianna, bless her heart, threw her hands up. I genuinely don't understand you, Celine. Like, what do you see that we're not seeing? Celine took a breath. A man who shows up. That's it. That's the whole thing. A man who shows up for his kid, shows up for his work, and didn't walk in here pretending to be something he's not. She paused. You want to know what's rare? That, right there. The studio went quiet for exactly 3 seconds, and then the audience completely lost it. Hey, my people, if this story already has you feeling some type of way, you are exactly where you need to be. Please hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and drop a comment telling us where in the world you are watching from. We want to know how far this story is traveling, because something tells us Celine and Ezekiel are about to take us somewhere. Now let's get back to it, because Ezekiel hasn't said the most important thing yet. And when he does, nothing in that studio is ever going to be the same. Delilah let the moment breathe for exactly as long as television allowed, which was about 4 seconds. And then she pivoted back to Ezekiel with a knowing smile. Okay, Ezekiel, let's bring those other ladies back in. I think they owe you an explanation. The 4 women who had popped their balloons were brought back to the stage. Brianna, Amber, Claudette, and a 4th woman named Yolanda Pierce, 29, who had popped her balloons so fast in the first 3 seconds that she hadn't even heard his name yet. Delilah started with Brianna. Brianna, you were first. What was it about Ezekiel that caused such an immediate reaction? Brianna did not look even slightly embarrassed. Okay, look, you knew you were going to be on national television, right? And you showed up in a work shirt and boots. That tells me everything I need to know about how you see yourself. It's not just the plumber thing. It's the fact that you dress like one off the clock, too. That's giving this is my whole personality energy, and that's just not the vibe I'm looking for. The audience booed. Brianna shrugged. Ezekiel nodded slowly like he was taking notes. Delilah moved to Amber. Amber, the daughter was the breaking point for you? Look, I could maybe get over the plumber thing eventually. But the kid? I'm 27. I have plans. I have a vision board. And nowhere on that vision board does it say instant stepmom. I'm not built for that. And if he's going to be father of the year, Claudette added from beside her, when exactly is he going to have time to spoil somebody? To actually invest in a relationship? Because children are demanding, and I deserve attention. Delilah blinked. Okay, she said carefully. And Yolanda, you popped your balloon before he even said his name. Walk us through that. Yolanda looked briefly ashamed. I mean, the boots, she said quietly. The boots, Delilah repeated. The boots. The audience groaned. Ezekiel looked down at his boots, then back up, still smiling. "These boots," he said slowly, "have walked through a lot. Nobody knew yet just how much weight that sentence was carrying." Delilah clapped her hands together. "All right, Ezekiel, the big question. Celine kept her balloon. She stood by you through the boots, through the work shirt, through the daughter reveal. Is this a match? Would you like to go on a date with Celine Beaumont?" Ezekiel looked at Celine, and Celine looked back at him, and the whole studio held its breath. "Yes," he said. "I would love to." The audience cheered. "But," Ezekiel added, raising one hand, "I have to be honest about something first." The cheering died down into a thick, curious silence. Delilah tilted her head. "Oh?" Ezekiel exhaled slowly, like a man who had been carrying something heavy for a long time and was finally deciding to set it down. "It's true that I'm a plumber," he began. "I have been since I was 18 years old. But I'm not just a plumber." Brianna crossed her arms. "Here we go. He's going to say he's in debt." "I own my own plumbing company," Ezekiel said. Brianna uncrossed her arms. 40 locations on the West Coast alone. The studio went completely still. 212 franchises nationwide. Delilah's clipboard slowly lowered. "The man," said someone in the production team loud enough for the whole room to hear, "is a billionaire." And that's when the studio absolutely detonated. The screaming was instant. The audience was on their feet. Brianna's hand flew to her mouth. Amber grabbed Claudette's arm. Yolanda, the woman who popped her balloon over Boots, sat down like her legs had simply decided they were done working. But Ezekiel wasn't finished. Because what came next wasn't about the money. It never was. He looked at the floor for a moment. Just a beat. Just long enough for the room to feel that something heavier was coming. "My wife and I were high school sweethearts," he said quietly. The studio somehow got even quieter. "We grew up together. We had plans together. And then, when our daughter was born, she didn't make it." Not a single sound from the audience. "She passed away during childbirth. And in one night I went from being a husband with a future to a widower with a newborn, and no idea what I was doing." Celine's hand had moved, quietly, without thinking, to rest over her own heart. "I couldn't go back to my old life after that. Everything looked different. So I built a new one. One where I could be there for my daughter every single day. One that would make my wife proud." He paused. "I didn't plan for it to become what it became. I just kept working. And somewhere along the way, the company grew. And Ava grew. And I looked up one day and realized I had everything I'd ever wanted, except someone to share it with. The silence in that studio was the kind that meant something. So I started dating again," he continued. "But every time I met someone, I never knew, was she here for me? Or for what I could give her?" He looked around the room slowly. "That's why I did this. I just wanted someone who would want me in steel-toed boots and a work shirt. Because that's who I actually am." Nobody moved. And then Brianna, loudly, desperately, with zero shame, said, "Can I please get another balloon?" The studio exploded into laughter and chaos. "Can I get one too?" Amber called out. "I have several," Delilah said dryly, reaching under the podium and producing a handful of fresh balloons. "That story was so beautiful," Claudette gushed, pressing her hands together like she was at church. "Everything you've built for your daughter, it's incredible. Truly." "I didn't mean anything I said earlier," Brianna said, stepping forward with her best smile assembled and aimed directly at Ezekiel. "I love a self-made man. Really. I'm a huge fan of self-made men." "Give me another chance?" Ezekiel looked at her for a long moment. "I feel like everybody's shown their true colors tonight," he said. Not unkindly, but clearly. "And I think that's actually a good thing." He turned back to Celine. "But Celine, if you're still willing, I'd love to take you out." Celine's smile spread slow and warm, the kind that started in her eyes before it reached her lips. "I would love that," she said. "Have you ever been to Paris?" Ezekiel asked. Celine blinked. No, I haven't. I've always wanted to." "Then Paris it is." And then, as if the universe had decided this moment needed one final exclamation point, a producer's voice carried clearly across the studio floor. "He has a jet." Yolanda, who was still sitting down from the shock, put her face in her hands. Brianna stood holding her fresh balloon, inflated, ready, and completely useless. And Ezekiel Cardenas, billionaire, widower, devoted father, and the most unbothered man in all of Los Angeles, held out his hand to the one woman in the room who had seen him clearly from the very beginning. Celine took it. But here's what none of them knew yet. The cameras didn't stop rolling when the show ended. And somewhere in that audience, watching everything with careful, calculating eyes, was a person who had recognized Ezekiel Cardenas the moment he walked through those doors. And they were already reaching for their phone. If Celine just proved that real love sees past the surface, drop a rose in the comments right now. And if Brianna asking for a new balloon after all that had you screaming, you need to like this video immediately because she had absolutely zero shame and we respect the audacity. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens when Ezekiel and Celine land in Paris. Because, trust me, somebody is about to show up where they are absolutely not welcome. Last time, Ezekiel Cardenas walked into a television studio in a worn gray work shirt and steel-toed boots. 5 women popped their balloons before he could finish a sentence. One woman called him a plumber like it was a criminal offense. Another one said she'd rather let cats eat her face. And the only woman who kept her balloon standing, a quiet, sharp-eyed art teacher from New Orleans named Celine Beaumont, did it without flinching once. And then Ezekiel dropped the bomb. 212 franchise locations. A 9-figure empire. Built from grief, love, and 16 years of showing up. The studio lost its mind. And 4 women, 4 grown, confident, vision board-having women, suddenly remembered that they had made some very questionable decisions tonight. But here's the thing. The night wasn't over yet. Not even close. The commercial break lasted exactly 4 minutes and 30 seconds. 4 minutes and 30 seconds during which the producers whispered furiously into headsets. The audience fanned themselves and argued with strangers sitting next to them. The lighting crew quietly adjusted the setup to accommodate what the show's director was already calling the most chaotic segment we have ever filmed. And the 4 women who had popped their balloons, they spent those 4 minutes and 30 seconds in a tight little huddle near the side of the stage, whispering, recalculating, and going through the full 5 stages of grief at a speed that would have impressed any therapist. Brianna was already in bargaining. Amber was somewhere between denial and anger, mostly at herself. Claudette was pulling up Ezekiel's company name on her phone with shaking fingers and making a noise that wasn't quite a word every time a new search result loaded. And Yolanda was just standing slightly apart from the group, staring at Ezekiel's boots from across the studio with the hollow expression of a woman who had made one decision and would be thinking about it for the next 45 years. 212 locations, Claudette whispered, still staring at her phone screen. Ezekiel, his last name is Cardenas. Cardenas Plumbing Solutions. Oh my God. Oh my God. He was on Forbes. Stop, Amber said. He was on Forbes twice. I said stop. The boots, Yolanda, Brianna hissed, spinning to look at her. You popped your balloon over the boots. I know what I did, Brianna, Yolanda said quietly. The boots that have walked through a lot. I know, Brianna. Those are the boots of a billionaire, Yolanda. I am aware. The cameras came back up. Delilah walked back onto the stage with the energy of a woman who had been told during the break that tonight's episode was already being called historic by the network, and had decided to fully lean into it. Welcome back, everyone, she said, smoothing her blazer and absolutely beaming. So, we have had quite a night. Quite a night. She let that land. But here's the thing. We are not done. Because I have been doing this show for 3 seasons and I have never, not once, seen a moment like the one we just had. And I think it deserves a little more time. The audience cheered so loudly the ceiling vibrated. So, Ezekiel, Celine, you're not going anywhere just yet. We're going to stay in this moment a little longer. Is that okay with you? Ezekiel smiled. I've got time, Celine laughed softly. Sure. Wonderful, Delilah said. And then she turned, slowly, deliberately, with maximum dramatic energy, to the 4 women on the side of the stage. And neither are you ladies, because I think the audience has some things they'd like to say. The audience lost it. Oh no, Amber said under her breath. Oh yes, said Delilah. She walked to the edge of the stage and scanned the crowd with a wide grin. All right, who has something to say? Questions, comments, concerns. The floor is yours. Keep it clean, keep it real, and please, be honest. Lord knows we've had enough performance for one evening. The first hand up belonged to a woman somewhere in her early 40s. Natural hair, reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, the specific energy of a woman who had raised at least 2 children and was not afraid of conflict. Delilah handed her the roaming mic. My question, she said, standing up slowly and looking directly at the 4 women on the side of the stage, is for Brianna. Brianna straightened up immediately, shoulders back, chin lifted, ready. You said, and I'm quoting you directly, that you would rather let cats eat your face than date a plumber. She paused. I want to know, was that about the job? Or was it about the fact that you assumed the job meant he was beneath you? Dead silence. Brianna opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I mean, I think it was more about compatibility. Like, I have certain standards. Standards, the woman repeated slowly. Yes, standards. Standards that told you, within 3 seconds, that this man who you had never spoken a word to was not worth your time. Look, I go with my gut. Your gut told you wrong, baby, the woman said simply, and sat back down. The audience applauded so hard it sounded like rainfall. Brianna pressed her lips together and looked at the floor. Delilah pointed to the next hand, a young woman, maybe 23, with box braids and a phone already raised to record. This question is for Ezekiel, she said. Okay, so, you're fine, you're successful, you're clearly a good dad. What is actually wrong with you? Like, genuinely, because nobody is this perfect. What's the thing? The audience erupted into laughter. Ezekiel laughed too. That real, warm laugh again. The thing, he repeated. The thing. The flaw. The red flag. Give us something. Ezekiel thought about it for a genuine moment. I work too much. I always have. My daughter tells me I check my emails during movie night, and she's not wrong. That's it, the young woman pressed. I also burn everything I try to cook. Everything. My daughter refuses to eat anything I make unless it came from a restaurant or a box. The audience laughed. One more, the young woman pushed. Ezekiel paused. I don't let people in easily, he said, and this time his voice was quieter. More careful. I haven't, not since my wife. It takes me a long time to trust someone. A really long time. The laughter in the room softened into something warmer. Celine was watching him, not with the wide-eyed look of someone hearing something surprising, but with the quiet look of someone who had already suspected it, who understood it maybe, who recognized it from the inside. Thank you, the young woman said softly, and sat down. Delilah pointed to one more hand, an older gentleman near the back. Distinguished, gray at his temples, a wedding ring on his finger that looked like it had been there for decades. I'm not going to ask a question, he said, standing up. I just want to say something. Go ahead, Delilah said. The man looked at Ezekiel. My wife passed away 11 years ago, and I raised 3 kids alone after that, and I want you to know what you just described. Building something from nothing in the middle of that kind of grief, while raising a child, he shook his head slowly. That is not ordinary. That is not something everybody can do, and the right woman will understand that. He sat down. Nobody cheered this time. The room was too full for cheering. Too heavy in the best possible way. Ezekiel nodded at the man once. Slow. Grateful. The kind of nod that carries more weight than a whole conversation. And Celine, quietly, without making a show of it, reached over and touched Ezekiel's arm. Just briefly. Just for a second. But the camera caught it. And the audience saw it, and every single person in that studio understood what it meant. But then, that's when the real show started, because Delilah had one more thing up her sleeve. Okay, she said, turning to the 4 women with a smile that could only be described as lovingly dangerous. Ladies, I want to give you a chance to speak, not to defend yourselves. I think we're past that, but to say whatever it is you need to say. To Ezekiel, right now, in front of everyone. A charged silence fell over the studio. Brianna stepped forward first. Because of course she did. She walked to the center of the stage, and to her credit, she didn't try to dress it up. She stood in front of Ezekiel and looked him straight in the eye and said, I was wrong. I judged you in 3 seconds, and I was completely wrong, and I'm embarrassed. Not because of what you're worth, but because I didn't even give you a chance to be a person before I decided you weren't enough. She exhaled. I'm sorry. The audience was quiet. Ezekiel looked at her for a moment. I appreciate that, Brianna. Really. And, she added, producing a fully inflated balloon from behind her back, and nobody knew where she had gotten it or how long she had been holding it. I would like a second chance. The audience went absolutely feral. Brianna. Delilah covered her face with her clipboard. I'm just saying. You just apologized. And I meant every word, but I'm also a woman who knows what she wants. And right now I want a second chance, and I think honesty is attractive. You have the audacity of a person who has never once been told no, Delilah said, and the audience screamed with laughter. Ezekiel was laughing too. He held up one hand. Brianna, I respect the boldness. Genuinely. Brianna stood up straighter. Hope flickering. But no, the balloon in her hand made a small, sad sound as her grip loosened. Amber stepped forward next. She skipped the long speech. I made a vision board, she said, and I'm starting to think I need to throw the whole board away, because apparently my vision was wrong. She looked at Celine, then back at Ezekiel. She deserves you. I see that now. I want you to know I see it." It was the most genuine thing Amber had said all night, and the audience felt it. "Thank you, Amber," Ezekiel said simply. Claudette stepped forward. She had put her phone away. "I came on this show looking for someone to elevate my life," she said quietly. "And I realized I was thinking about that completely backwards. I was asking what someone could give me, and I never once thought about what I could give them." She paused. "That's something I need to sit with." The audience applauded. "That's growth," Delilah said warmly. "Real growth." "I see you, Claudette." And then there was Yolanda. Yolanda walked to the center of the stage, looked at Ezekiel, looked down at his boots, looked back up at his face. "I popped my balloon," she said slowly. "Because of your boots." "I know," Ezekiel said. "I would like to formally apologize to you." "Okay. And to the boots. I'll let them know. Do they have a name?" "The boots?" Ezekiel stared at her. The audience was already dying. "Yolanda," he said carefully, "the boots do not have names, right?" "Okay. I wanted to be thorough." "I appreciate the thoroughness. Can I get a balloon?" "No." "Okay." She walked back to her spot. The audience gave her a standing ovation for absolutely no logical reason, and every emotional one. Delilah wiped a tear from the corner of her eye, and this time it wasn't from laughter. "Okay," she said, gathering herself. "I think in 3 seasons of this show, this is the moment I'm going to remember the longest." She looked at Ezekiel. "You came in here asking a simple question, and I think you got your answer." Ezekiel nodded. "I did." "And Celine," Delilah said, turning to her, "how are you feeling right now? Because you have been the quietest, steadiest person in this entire room tonight, and I need to know what's going on inside that head of yours." Celine smiled. That slow, warm, knowing smile that had been quietly running the whole show from the beginning. "Honestly," she said, "I feel like I just watched a whole lot of people learn something tonight. Including me." "What did you learn?" Delilah asked. Celine looked at Ezekiel. That sometimes the most valuable thing in the room is the thing everybody else walked past. The studio went absolutely silent for 3 full seconds. And then it went completely and totally crazy. "All right," Delilah said, straightening up and addressing the camera directly with the biggest smile of the night. "Ezekiel Cardenas, Celine Beaumont. You came into this building tonight as strangers. And you're leaving it with dinner reservations in Paris." She shook her head in disbelief. "This show, y'all. This show. He has a jet." A producer's voice reminded everyone helpfully from offstage. "We know he has a jet," 3 audience members shouted back simultaneously. If Celine just said what your whole heart was thinking, drop a rose in the comments right now because she carried this entire episode with grace and we are not worthy. And if Yolanda apologizing to the boots personally just made your whole week, like this video and subscribe because we need you here for what happens next. Trust me when I tell you, Paris is not going to go the way anybody planned. 2 days later, Los Angeles International Airport, private terminal. The morning was cool and gray, the kind of LA morning that couldn't decide if it wanted to be summer or not. The kind of morning that felt like a held breath. Celine stood outside the terminal entrance with a carry-on bag, and the expression of a woman who was trying very hard to be calm about the fact that she was about to board a private jet to Paris for dinner with a billionaire she had met 48 hours ago on a balloon-popping game show. She was wearing a caramel-colored wrap dress that moved in the breeze, her natural hair down for the first time, thick dark coils falling past her shoulders. Small gold earrings, no fuss, just herself. And she was talking on the phone. "Mama, I'm fine," she said, pulling her bag strap higher on her shoulder. "You met this man on a television show, Celine." "I know where I met him. A television show where women pop balloons. That's the format, yes. And now you're flying to Paris. On a private jet, Mama." A pause on the other end. "Okay, but call me when you land." Celine laughed, warm and full, and hung up, just as a black SUV pulled smoothly into the terminal. The door opened, and Ezekiel stepped out. He was not in a work shirt today. He was in a fitted dark navy shirt, sleeves rolled to the forearms, dark trousers, clean leather shoes, same fresh fade, same 5 o'clock shadow, same quiet eyes, but something in them looked different today. Lighter, maybe, like a man who had set something down and hadn't picked it back up yet. He saw Celine and smiled. "You came," he said. "You have a jet," she said. "Of course I came." He laughed. "I wasn't sure." "I told you I would. People say a lot of things." She tilted her head and looked at him. "I'm not most people." He looked at her for a moment, steady, quiet, and then nodded once. "No." "I'm starting to see that." They walked toward the terminal together, and neither of them noticed the figure standing 50 yards away near the main entrance of the building, still. Watching. Phone pressed to their ear. Waiting. The flight to Paris was 9 hours and 40 minutes. And somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean, somewhere between a shared meal, a conversation that started about art and ended up somewhere neither of them had planned, Ezekiel told Celine something he hadn't told anyone in a very long time. Her name was Camille, he said quietly, looking out the small oval window at nothing but dark sky and stars. She was funny, like genuinely embarrassingly funny, the kind of person who made grocery shopping feel like an event. He smiled at the window. She would have hated that show. She would have watched every second of it and hated every second of it and then texted me a full review after. Celine was quiet, listening the way she listened, with her whole body, not just her ears. Ava looks exactly like her, he continued. Same eyes. Same smile. Same way of looking at you like she already knows what you're about to say. He paused. Sometimes it's the greatest gift in the world. And sometimes... He stopped. Sometimes it's hard, Celine said softly. He looked at her. Yeah. You don't have to talk about it, she said. I know, he said. But I think I want to. And that, right there, was the thing. Not the jet, not the 200 franchises, not the Forbes features, or the 9-figure empire. That. Right there. A man choosing to be known. Celine looked at him for a long moment. And then she said, quietly, simply, tell me about her. And he did. For the next 2 hours, somewhere above the Atlantic, Ezekiel Cardenas talked about his wife. And Celine Beaumont listened, and the stars outside the window stayed exactly where they were, doing what stars do, holding their positions quietly in the dark so that people below them can find their way. But then, Charles de Gaulle Airport, Paris, France. Early morning. They landed just as the city was waking up. Pale gold light stretching across the rooftops, the air cool and impossibly clean. Everything moving at that specific, unhurried Paris pace that makes the rest of the world feel like it's in too much of a hurry. Ezekiel had arranged everything. A car, a driver, a hotel with a view of the Seine that made Celine stop in the doorway of her room and just stand there for a full 30 seconds without saying anything. You okay? Ezekiel asked from behind her. I teach middle school, she said, not turning around. I grade papier-mâché projects for a living. I am not okay. I am the furthest thing from okay. He laughed. She turned around. This is too much. It's dinner, he said. It's Paris, Ezekiel. I know where it is. You can't just... She stopped. Looked at him. Why? Why all of this? He leaned against the doorframe. Thought about it honestly. Because you kept your balloon, he said simply. And I wanted you to know that that meant something. Celine looked at him for a long moment, and then she laughed, soft and helpless, and turned back to the view. Okay, she said quietly. Okay. Dinner was at a small restaurant on the left bank. Not flashy, not loud. Nothing like what anyone would have expected from a billionaire. Candlelight. Stone walls. A menu handwritten in French. A waiter named Francois, who was approximately 90 years old and deeply unimpressed by everything, which somehow made the whole thing feel more perfect. They talked for 4 hours. About Ava and her opinions on everything. About Celine's students and the boy in her third period class who painted exclusively in shades of gray because he said colors were too loud. About grief and time and the strange way life keeps moving even when you're not ready for it to. About plumbing, which turned out to be genuinely fascinating when the person explaining it had spent 16 years thinking deeply about it. At some point, Francois brought dessert that neither of them had ordered and simply placed it between them without explanation and walked away. Did we order this? Celine asked. No, Ezekiel said. They ate it anyway, and at some point during the creme brulee and the second glass of wine, and the quiet that had settled comfortably between them, the kind of quiet that means something good, Celine looked at him and said, for what it's worth, I didn't keep my balloon because I felt sorry for you. I know, he said. I kept it because you walked in there exactly as yourself, and didn't apologize for a single second of it. And I thought, that's rare. That is genuinely rare. Ezekiel looked at her across the candlelight. You know what's also rare? What? Someone who sees that. Before they know anything else about you. The candle between them flickered. Outside, Paris kept doing what Paris does. And inside this small stone restaurant on the left bank, something quiet and real and unhurried was beginning. But then Ezekiel's phone buzzed. He glanced at it. A text from a number he didn't recognize. "Enjoying Paris?" He frowned. Typed back, "Who is this?" 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then appeared again. And then the response came. And the expression on Ezekiel Cardenas' face changed completely. Not dramatically, not in the way people change in movies. No sharp intake of breath, no sudden movement. Just a quiet, slow shift, like a door closing somewhere deep inside him. "Everything okay?" Celine asked, watching him. He set the phone face down on the table, smiled at her, and the smile was real, but something behind it was different now. "Yeah," he said. "Everything's fine." But it wasn't, and the person who had sent that message, the same person who had been watching from 50 yards away at LAX, was already booked on the next flight to Paris. If this Paris date just gave you all the butterflies and you are fully rooting for Ezekiel and Celine, comment left bank right now, because Francois bringing that unrequested creme brulee is the most romantic thing that has happened on this channel. And somebody just sent Ezekiel a text that wiped the smile clean off his face in Paris. If you need to know who that is right now, subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss a single second of what's coming, because this story is just getting started. There is a specific kind of silence that falls over a person when they read something they weren't prepared for. Not the comfortable silence of a quiet room, not the peaceful silence of a sleeping city, but the kind of silence that settles into the chest like cold water. Slow, spreading, impossible to ignore. That was the silence that fell over Ezekiel Cardenas in a candlelit restaurant on the left bank of Paris, France, on what should have been the most uncomplicated evening he'd had in years. His phone was face down on the white tablecloth. The creme brulee was half-eaten between him and the most interesting woman he had met in a very long time. Francois, their ancient, unbothered waiter, was somewhere in the back, probably judging everyone equally. The Seine was right outside, doing its timeless Seine things. Everything was perfect. And then that text came, and perfect quietly excused itself from the table. "You sure you're okay?" Celine asked again. She was watching him the way she watched everything, carefully, without pressure, but missing absolutely nothing. "Yeah," Ezekiel said, and this time he picked up his wine glass and took a slow sip, and redirected the conversation so smoothly that a less perceptive person would have never noticed the pivot. But Celine noticed. She filed it away quietly, said nothing, laughed at the right moments. Finished her creme brulee. Let the evening close the way beautiful evenings should. Gently, without force, with the specific warmth of a night that knows it has done its job well. But when she got back to her hotel room and sat on the edge of that bed overlooking the Seine, she stared at the ceiling for a long time. Something had changed at that table, and she didn't know what it was yet. But she knew. The way certain people know things without being able to explain how that whatever was in that text message was not small. Now, let's talk about who sent it, because to understand that, we need to go back. Not far. Just far enough. Her name was Renata Voss, 36 years old, originally from Miami, half black, half German, with the kind of face that made people stop mid-sentence and forget what they were saying. Sharp cheekbones, gray-green eyes, dark locks cut to her jaw. She was the kind of beautiful that came with an edge to it, the kind that made you want to look, and also made you instinctively check your pockets afterward. Renata was a talent manager, high-end, high-stakes, Hollywood-adjacent, the kind of person who knew everyone worth knowing in Los Angeles and made sure everyone worth knowing knew her. She had her name on 3 podcasts, a lifestyle brand, and a management roster that included 2 Grammy-nominated artists and a director whose last film had premiered at Sundance. She was sharp. She was strategic. And she was, by most measurable definitions, wildly successful. But here's the thing about Renata Voss. She had a history with Ezekiel Cardenas. Not a long one. Not the kind that gets framed and hung on walls. But the kind that leaves marks anyway. The kind that happens when 2 ambitious, emotionally unavailable people find each other at exactly the wrong time and mistake intensity for intimacy. They had dated, briefly. About 2 years ago. 6 months that had started as electric and ended as complicated. Because Ezekiel had eventually realized that Renata wasn't interested in knowing him. She was interested in what knowing him could do for her brand. And the moment he understood that, he ended it. Cleanly, quietly, completely. Renata had not taken it cleanly or quietly. She had taken it the way certain people take rejection, as a problem to be solved. A door that had been closed incorrectly and simply needed the right key. She had tried calling. He changed his number. She had tried showing up at his office twice. His assistant, A brilliant, no-nonsense Haitian woman named Celeste Moreau had turned her away both times with the serene efficiency of someone who had been hired specifically for situations like this. And then Renata had gone quiet. For 2 years. Long enough that Ezekiel had stopped thinking about it. Long enough that it had faded into the background noise of his life. The way old, resolved things do. But Renata hadn't gone quiet because she'd moved on. She'd gone quiet because she was waiting for the right moment. The right leverage. The right situation. And then Ezekiel Cardenas walked onto a nationally televised dating show in steel-toed boots and a work shirt. And Renata, who had been watching from her couch in her West Hollywood apartment with a glass of wine and genuine shock, sat up very slowly and smiled, because this was her moment. She had been in that studio audience within 24 hours. She had watched everything unfold live. She had seen Soline. She had watched Ezekiel laugh, that real laugh, for the first time in God knew how long. She had watched him open up in front of 200 strangers in a way he had never once opened up with her. And something in Renata Voss had made a decision. If she couldn't have Ezekiel Cardenas, then she was going to make very sure that nobody else could either. The text she had sent him in Paris was simple, 6 words. We need to talk. About Ava. Ezekiel was on the phone with his daughter's nanny, a warm, unflappable Puerto Rican woman named Marisol Fuentes, within 4 minutes of getting back to his hotel room. Is Ava okay? He said the moment Marisol picked up. His voice was steady, but there was something underneath it, something tightly coiled. Ava is completely fine, Mr. Cardenas, Marisol said, and he could hear the television in the background and Ava's voice asking someone to pass the remote. She just finished her homework. She asked me to remind you that you promised her a croissant from Paris. Tell her I have 3, he said. The tightly coiled thing loosened slightly. Nobody called the house tonight? Nobody came by? A pause. No. Should I be worried? No, he said. Keep the doors locked. I'll be home in 2 days. He hung up, sat on the edge of his bed, stared at the text for a long time. Then he typed back. Don't do this, Renata. 3 dots. Then, I'm already in Paris, Zeke. We can do this the easy way or the public way. Your choice. But we will talk. He set the phone down, pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes, and sat in the specific silence of a man who had built a careful, protected life and was now watching someone walk toward it with a crowbar. Morning came the way Paris mornings do, slow, golden, and completely indifferent to anyone's problems. Ezekiel had texted Soline early. Breakfast? There's a place near the river I think you'd like. She had responded with 1 word. Always. He smiled at that. Just briefly. They met at a small cafe 3 blocks from the hotel, the kind of place with mismatched chairs and a chalkboard menu and coffee so good it felt like an apology for every bad cup you'd ever had. Soline showed up in a cream-colored sweater and dark jeans, her coils loose around her shoulders, a small sketchbook tucked under her arm. You sketch? Ezekiel asked, nodding at it as she sat down. Always, she said. When I'm in a new place I sketch what I see. It helps me remember things differently than photos do. Differently how? Photos remember what something looked like. Sketches remember how it felt. He looked at her across the table. You're going to sketch Paris? I already started, she said. She opened the sketchbook and slid it across to him. He looked down at the page. It was the restaurant from last night. The stone walls. The candles. The table. Francois in the background, rendered in about 4 precise lines that somehow captured his entire personality. And across the table from where her perspective sat, Ezekiel. Drawn from memory, leaning forward slightly, listening. The expression on his face so specific, so exactly right, that he felt something shift in his chest that he wasn't entirely prepared for. This is, he stopped. Soline, this is really good. It's just a sketch, she said, but she was smiling. No, he said. It's not. He slid it back carefully, like it was something that mattered. Because it was. They ordered coffee and pastries, and the morning moved the way good mornings do. Unhurried, easy, full of small moments that don't announce themselves as important, but somehow are. And then Soline set her coffee cup down and looked at him. The text last night, she said simply, not a question, not an accusation. Just an opening. An invitation to be honest if he wanted to be. Ezekiel looked at her, thought about deflecting. Decided against it. Someone from my past, he said. Someone I ended things with 2 years ago, who apparently has not ended things with me. Soline nodded slowly. A woman. Yes. And she's in Paris. He exhaled. She says she needs to talk. She mentioned Ava. Soline's expression shifted. Just slightly. She mentioned your daughter? As leverage, he said. I think. I checked. Ava is fine. Marisol confirmed it. But Renata knows that mentioning Ava is the fastest way to get my attention. That's... Soline stopped herself. Manipulative? Ezekiel offered. I was going to say strategic, Soline said carefully. But yes, also that. He looked at her. I have to meet with her. I need to understand what she actually wants before this becomes something I can't contain quietly. Okay, Soline said. He blinked. Okay? You're not asking my permission, Ezekiel. You're explaining your situation. Those are different things. She picked her coffee back up. Handle it. I'll be here. He stared at her for a moment. You know, he said slowly, most people would. I'm not most people, she said. You said that yourself. He laughed, soft and surprised. I did say that. You did, he nodded once. I'll be back by afternoon. I'll be sketching the river, she said simply. And that was that. He met Renata at a hotel bar near the Palais Royal at 10 in the morning, which was objectively too early for what this conversation was going to be, but here they were. She was already there when he arrived. Sitting at the bar in a silk blouse and dark trousers, locks falling perfectly, gray-green eyes tracking him the moment he walked through the door. A glass of sparkling water in front of her, untouched. She looked exactly the same as he remembered, and he felt nothing, which was, he supposed, the answer to a question he hadn't known he was still asking. You look good, she said. Renata. He sat down. Didn't order anything. What do you want? She smiled, the kind of smile that had probably worked on a lot of people, in a lot of rooms. No small talk? It's 10 in the morning in Paris, and you used my daughter's name to get my attention, he said evenly. No small talk. Renata's smile didn't waver, but something behind it recalculated. Fine, she said. I'll be direct, please. She turned her water glass slowly. You went on that show. I did. You told 40 million people your story. Camille. Ava. The company. All of it. I did. Do you have any idea what that's done to your public profile in the last 72 hours? She reached into her bag and slid a tablet across the bar toward him. News articles. Social media analytics. A clip of the show that had been viewed 11 million times in 2 days. Ezekiel looked at it. Then at her. Your point? My point is that you are a brand now, whether you want to be or not. And brands need management, proper management. Not some PR firm that sends out press releases, actual strategic brand cultivation. She leaned forward slightly. I can do that for you. I'm good at it, Ezekiel. You know I'm good at it. He was quiet for a moment. That's what this is, he said slowly. A business pitch. A business pitch with history, she said. Which makes it better. We know each other. We work well together. We didn't work well together, Renata. Professionally, you followed me to Paris to pitch me brand management. I followed you to Paris because you were about to make a very expensive mistake by letting this moment happen without anyone steering it. Her voice sharpened slightly. That woman has no idea what your world is like. She's a schoolteacher, Ezekiel. She grades art projects. The moment this story fully breaks, and it will fully break, it's already breaking, she is going to be standing in the middle of a storm she has absolutely no tools to navigate. And you are going to be too busy protecting your company and your daughter to protect her too. Silence. Ezekiel looked at the tablet. Then at Renata. Are you done? He asked. She held his gaze. I'm trying to help you. No, he said quietly. You're trying to position yourself. You always were. He stood up. I'm going to say this once, Renata, clearly. Whatever this is, the texts, Paris, this conversation, it ends here. Today. If you contact me again, I'll have my legal team handle it. If you go near Soline, same thing. And if you ever use Ava's name as a bargaining chip again. He leaned forward slightly, and his voice dropped to something very quiet and very final. I will become a version of myself that you do not want to meet professionally or personally. Do you understand me? Renata looked at him. For a long moment she said nothing. The recalculating thing happened again behind her eyes. Faster this time. More complicated. And then she picked up her sparkling water. Took a slow sip, set it back down. She's going to get hurt, Renata said quietly. Not by you, but by everything that comes with you. And when she does, I need you to remember that I tried to tell you. Goodbye, Renata, he said. And he walked out. He found Soline exactly where she said she'd be. Sitting on a bench along the Seine, sketchbook open on her knee, a takeaway coffee cup balanced on the bench beside her, the river doing its silver, unhurried thing in front of her. She was drawing the Pont Neuf. She didn't look up when he sat down beside her, just kept her pencil moving, but she shifted slightly on the bench. Making room. The way people do when someone's presence is welcome, without needing to be announced. He sat. The river moved. How'd it go? She asked, still drawing. It was a business pitch, he said. Wrapped in a threat, wrapped in a warning, wrapped in something she probably genuinely believes is concern. Celine's pencil slowed. What was the warning? He looked at the water. That my world is too much for you. Celine was quiet for a moment. Then she turned the sketchbook slightly and kept drawing. What do you think? I think, he said slowly, that you are the only person I have met in 2 years who has consistently surprised me. And I think warning someone like you about something like that is like warning the river about the rain. Celine stopped drawing. Looked at him. That might be the best thing anyone has ever said to me, she said. I've had 9 hours on a transatlantic flight to work on my material, he said. She laughed. That full, warm, helpless laugh, and leaned back on the bench and looked at the sky. And he looked at her, and the Seine kept moving. But then, here is where the story takes a turn that even Ezekiel didn't see coming. Because Renata Voss, for all her calculation and strategy, had not been entirely wrong about one thing. The clip of the show had been viewed 11 million times, and growing. And somewhere in those 11 million views was a journalist, a very good journalist, the kind with sources, patience, and a genuine nose for the story underneath the story. Her name was Petra Wainwright, 38, Chicago-based. She wrote for a financial publication that specialized in the intersection of wealth, culture, and human interest. She had won 2 awards for investigative features and had a reputation for finding the thread that everyone else had missed. And the thread she had found in Ezekiel Cardenas' story was not about the romance. It was about the company. Specifically, it was about a silent business partner from the early days of Cardenas Plumbing Solutions. A man who had invested seed money in Ezekiel's first 10 locations 12 years ago, when Ezekiel was a grieving widower with a newborn and a dream and very little else. A man who had taken a 30% stake in the company and then, quietly over the years, had been incrementally, systematically, and very deliberately trying to acquire more. His name was Dorian Ashworth, 52 years old. Old money, Boston-born, LA-based. The kind of white man who wore his wealth like a second skin. Understated, inevitable, everywhere. He sat on 4 corporate boards, owned a private equity firm, and had a particular talent for identifying self-made entrepreneurs at the peak of their momentum and finding ways to make them dependent on his resources before they realized what was happening. He had done it to 3 companies before Cardenas Plumbing Solutions. And Petra Wainwright had the documents to prove it. What she didn't have yet was Ezekiel's side of the story. She didn't know how much he knew. She didn't know if he was a victim or a participant. She didn't know if the man who had just charmed 11 million people on a balloon-popping game show was aware that the foundation of his empire had a crack in it, or if he'd been living on top of that crack for years without knowing. She had emailed his publicist 3 days ago. No response. She had called his company's main line. Transferred to voicemail. And so Petra Wainwright, resourceful, relentless, and absolutely certain she was sitting on the most important story of her career, had booked a flight to Paris. Because Ezekiel Cardenas was there. And the story was ready. And waiting was not something Petra Wainwright did well. Ezekiel's phone rang at 4 in the afternoon. He and Celine were in a small bookshop near Saint-Germain-des-Prés, the kind of place where the shelves went all the way to the ceiling, and everything smelled like old paper and good decisions. Celine was running her finger along a row of French art books with the specific reverence of a person in their natural habitat. Ezekiel was watching her and thinking about something he hadn't thought about in years. What it would feel like to share ordinary afternoons with someone again. His phone rang. The number was his lead attorney, Solomon Briggs, a meticulous, 60-year-old black man from Detroit who had been Ezekiel's legal counsel for 8 years and who never called without a reason that justified it. Solomon, Ezekiel answered, stepping toward the back of the shop. Where are you? Solomon's voice was measured. Deliberately calm, the way it got when something was not calm at all. Paris. What's wrong? I need you to listen carefully, Solomon said. I received a call this morning from a journalist named Petra Wainwright. She's writing a piece on Cardenas Plumbing Solutions, specifically on Dorian Ashworth's stake in the company and a series of contract amendments from 12 years ago that she claims significantly expand his acquisition rights. The bookshop felt suddenly very quiet. What contract amendments? Ezekiel said. A pause. Ezekiel? Solomon said carefully. You signed documents in the first year after Camille passed. You were running on no sleep and grief and a newborn. There were a series of amendments buried in the renewal paperwork for Ashworth's investment agreement. Small language changes, the kind that look like standard legalese until someone sits down with them properly. Solomon, he has language in those documents that, under specific conditions, specifically a significant increase in your public profile and a commensurate rise in company valuation, gives him the right to trigger a forced buyout of your majority stake. The silence that followed was the longest 3 seconds in the history of the Saint-Germain-des-Prés bookshop. "Say that again," Ezekiel said quietly. "The clip of the show," Solomon said. 11 million views in 72 hours. Your company's valuation has jumped 40% in the public eye in 3 days, Ezekiel. If Ashworth's team has been watching, and I believe they have been watching, the conditions for that clause may have just been triggered." Ezekiel stood very still. Across the bookshop, Celine pulled a large art book from the shelf and held it up to show him, bright-eyed, completely unaware, and he managed to smile at her, managed to nod, managed to look like a man standing in a charming Parisian bookshop on the second day of something that felt like the beginning of something good. But inside, everything was moving. "Get me everything," he said into the phone. "Every document, every amendment, every communication between Ashworth's team and anyone connected to this company. I want it on my desk the day I land." "Already pulling it," Solomon said. "Ezekiel, I need you to prepare yourself for the possibility that this is going to be a significant legal fight." "I've had significant fights before," Ezekiel said. "Not like this," Solomon said quietly. "This man has been planning this for 12 years, and the moment you put yourself in that studio, you may have just handed him the trigger." The call ended. Ezekiel stood in the back of the bookshop for a moment, hand on a shelf, eyes on nothing. And then he thought about something. He thought about Renata in that hotel bar this morning. Her gray-green eyes, the tablet with the view counts, the very specific way she had said, "You are a brand now, whether you want to be or not." He thought about how she had known, how she had shown up in Paris the same week the clip went viral, how she had pushed the brand management angle so hard. "I can help you navigate this." And he thought, did she know about Ashworth? Was this a warning, or was this something worse? He didn't tell Soline that evening. Not because he didn't trust her, but because what was happening was large and complicated and sharp-edged in the specific way that legal and financial betrayal tends to be, and he had not yet fully processed it himself, and he refused to bring something half-formed and jagged into a space that still felt new and worth protecting. So instead they had dinner at a brasserie near the Luxembourg Gardens. They shared a bottle of Burgundy and argued cheerfully about whether crepes or waffles were the superior vehicle for Nutella. Celine said crepes, obviously they were in France, and watched the city do its evening thing outside the window. And Ezekiel was present, genuinely, deliberately present, because he had learned a long time ago in the very worst year of his life that the moments worth having don't wait for you to be ready. You have to choose them in real time, even when everything else is burning. But when he walked Soline back to her hotel, and she turned at the door and looked at him with those wide, warm, nothing-missing eyes, she said, "You're carrying something heavy tonight." Not a question. He looked at her. "How do you do that?" "I'm an art teacher," she said simply. "I read what's underneath." He was quiet for a moment. "When we get back to LA, there are some things I need to tell you. About the company. About some complications." She nodded slowly. "Okay. It might get complicated," he said. Asterisk. "It might get loud. And I want you to know, before any of that starts, that tonight, and last night, and this whole ridiculous beautiful trip," he paused, choosing words carefully the way he did everything, "meant more to me than I know how to say properly yet." Celine looked at him for a long moment. "Ezekiel," she said quietly, "I kept my balloon. I'm not running from complicated." And she went inside. He stood outside her hotel for a full minute after the door closed. The Paris night was cool and quiet around him. The kind of quiet that feels like it's listening. And Ezekiel Cardenas, a man who had built an empire in the middle of grief, raised a daughter in the middle of loneliness, and walked onto a television show in steel-toed boots looking for something real, pulled out his phone. Not to answer texts, not to read emails. He opened his photos and found a picture of Ava, 9 years old, gap-toothed smile, holding a drawing she had made of the two of them, standing in front of a house. Her version of him was twice her size with a giant smile and what appeared to be a cape. He looked at it for a long time. "I'm figuring it out, baby," he said quietly to the photo. "I promise." He put the phone away and walked back to his hotel. And somewhere across the city, in a sleek, expensive hotel room with a view of the Eiffel Tower, Dorian Ashworth sat at a desk with a glass of whiskey and a folder of legal documents and a look on his face that belonged to a man who had been patient for a very long time, and was done being patient. He picked up his phone. Dialed a number. "Tell our legal team to prepare the filing," he said when the other end picked up. Cardenas just made himself famous, which means the clause is active. He took a sip of whiskey, and find out who the woman is. The lesson of this story so far is simple, and it will hit you differently depending on where you are in life. The people who see your value before they know your worth, those are the people worth keeping. And the people who only show up once they know the number, they were never really there. Solene kept her balloon when Ezekiel had nothing, or so she thought. And now she's in Paris. And the women who popped theirs? They're home, holding deflated rubber and regret. But here is the harder lesson, the one that Ezekiel is about to learn. Building something great makes you a target. And the bigger you build, the more people will try to take it. Not with force, not with weapons, but with paper. And patience. And the fine print you signed in the worst year of your life when you were too tired and too broken to read everything carefully. Watch who shows up when you're winning. Because sometimes the most dangerous person in the room isn't the one who rejected you. It's the one who invested in you. Back in Los Angeles, in a house with a view of the hills and a 9-year-old who had very strong opinions about croissants, Ava Cardenas was sitting at the kitchen table doing her homework. She paused, put her pencil down, looked at the drawing she had taped to the wall beside the table. Her dad. Her. The cape, and underneath it, in 9-year-old handwriting. "My dad is the best one." She picked her pencil back up. Kept working. She had no idea what was coming. None of them did. If Dorian Ashworth just made your blood boil and you need Ezekiel to destroy him in a courtroom, comment "cape up" right now because Ava drew her daddy with a cape. And honestly, she knew something we all needed to know. And if this story has you completely unable to think about anything else, subscribe and hit that bell notification, because we are nowhere near done, and the next chapter of this story is going to shake everything. Solene, Ava, the Empire, and every single decision Ezekiel has ever made is about to be tested like never before.